Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
It's working on it. It is now recording.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. That's the new intro, in case you were wondering. Now we're going with that.
We pulled up Skype today, and Johnny just out of nowhere picks up a cymbal off the ground. I was just like, "What are you doing with a cymbal?"
Well,
you
know,
don't even
Vito,
have a drum kit.
You know, we authors are supposed to be very good at symbols, using symbols.
Boy.
Anyway, okay, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna go.
It's falling apart very quickly.
Goodbye.
This is worse. This is worse than my drawing that I put on Instagram earlier this week.
I thought it couldn't get any worse.
It couldn't get any worse. I didn't even share the one of you as a dwarf. Maybe I'll have to share that today.
Oh no, it can it can still get worse.
Oh yes, it still can get worse. It can always get worse as far as my drawing skills are concerned. Anyway, welcome to the podcast, everyone. World Builders Anonymous. I am Vito, and this is, what's your name?
It's John. You know
okay,
this.
Okay, good. Yes,
we've been brothers for coming up on 24 years now. You can pretend to know my name.
I sometimes forget. It's fine. Anyway, okay, we are going to get started here today a little bit differently than usual. We're going to jump right into our past week of writing instead of doing a world building game, because we're going to save something like that for the latter half of the podcast. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Johnny, how did your week of writing go? I already know the answer to this.
Yes, well, as some of you know if you looked at our Instagram, I was at the beach this weekend from basically, I was gone from Wednesday to Sunday. And as such, I didn't get a lot done. I tried to write a bit as I could, but there wasn't much time for it. So not nearly as much as I would get done in a normal week. Sort of wrote the beginning half of an action scene. So not a whole lot from my end. What about you?
Before I go into that, it just occurred to me that maybe we should recap what we're doing here just very briefly for people who may have just stumbled onto the podcast as their first episode.
Sure.
If they're the kind of people who listen to things out of order, shame on you.
Yeah.
But we're glad you're here, though.
Don't go. Don't go.
No, wait. Yeah. John and I are both writing novels, and part of the whole purpose, at least, of this podcast is to chronicle our progress and show some of the techniques we're using to keep ourselves on track and actually finish first drafts of our novels, which we've not been able to do in the past. So we are about 3 or 4 weeks into the actual writing process at this point. We have both about 3 chapters pretty much written in our first draft. And yes, this week was a little bit less productive for John because he was out on vacation, which was super fun, I'm sure. And he saw all kinds of things we'll talk about later. But I, for one, had kind of a similar week, actually, not because I was on vacation, just because I kind of hit a snag, I guess. I felt very much like I used to years ago when I would try to write, when I would just feel like this scene's going nowhere. I don't have any ideas for it. Anything I write just immediately sounds hollow to me. I don't like it. I immediately delete it, and I don't even get very far. I ended up writing probably 700 words of this 4th chapter, and then tried to go back to it after like a few days, and it was just like, ugh.
You just didn't like it.
Didn't like it, man. Yeah. And so one thing we're going to talk a lot about today is what do you do when you hit that point in a certain chapter?
Prior to now, in your sort of previous writing you've done, what would you have done reaching this point?
I probably would have thought I need to do more research / brainstorming on the plot, because I never have plotted things out this specifically before. And even now, I don't have the most specific plot structure in the world planned out. But we did the 27 chapter sort of beat structure, the 27 beat structure that we chronicled in the last several episodes before this one, which worked very well for both of us. And I'm still on that. I've modified it a bit, but I still have that plan. I still have the roadmap for the whole thing.
Right.
So that's not what I'm going to do this time because of that. And also because I feel like that is just an excuse to go back to the old habit of world building and going back to what's comfortable when the going gets hard with the actual writing. Yeah. Sometimes you need to do that, but I don't think that's what I need this time. Do you have any thoughts on that before I kind of go into what the plan is for this week to get over that?
Sure, because I had the same problem earlier in the writing. Even when I first started, I would sit down and just either write something I hated or have nothing to write. And
Yeah, that was like the first day for you.
yeah, it was the first few days, actually. It was really, really rough. But actually having this podcast to sort of, I felt like I had to have something to show for by the time I got on the show.
Do your homework.
It felt exactly like that. So that kind of motivated me to push through. Also having the outline helped a lot. But really it was just a matter of not stopping and just keep hammering it in until you actually end up with something you can continue with, even if it's not your favorite thing.
Yeah, there's certainly a very big place, I think, for just plowing through that sort of thing and just writing something, even if you know it's terrible and know it sucks. But at the same time, I think what we've talked a little bit about, and what I think we're going to flesh out a little bit more right now, going forward this week, is a little bit different than that. Simply because we are going to, at least I am going to be starting the fourth chapter again with kind of a different goal in mind, kind of a different attitude towards it, I guess. Because up until this point, with this fourth chapter in particular, I've loved the first three chapters so far that I've written. Everything flowed very well. Just kind of, I would sit down and just went, got 2,000 words in like an hour and a half. This fourth chapter is the first time that hasn't happened in this process so far. And I think it's because those first three chapters had specific events that were happening in them that I knew beforehand. There was, a recovery dive, or at least a reconnaissance dive, that I knew what they were going to find at the end of it, and it was this big reveal, and everything was kind of leading up to that. And this is the first chapter after that big reveal, and kind of their initial reaction to it that I have had to write. And I don't have any specific like big event like that for this chapter that was going to happen. But I do have one. Sorry, go ahead.
It involves some more dialogue as well.
It does involve more talking, probably, but at least by default is what I went to. But I do know what's going to happen in the fifth chapter, and that's another kind of bigger event, I guess, that I already know beforehand. And this fourth chapter is kind of, in my plot, the way I had it so far, is just kind of them getting the team together. One of those, in a movie, it would probably be a little montage scene,
Like an Ocean's 11 kind of deal.
Yeah, at least it could be. I don't want it to be that. But that's kind of all I had so far. And so I think what I need to do is figure out how I can use this fourth chapter, because that's a thing that needs to happen in the story. Getting the crew for the ship together, getting their most trusted kind of people they work with the most, wherever they are, because they're having to move ahead basically the schedule, and they need somebody like tomorrow, like a crew tomorrow, to do this thing. But I hadn't thought of any of those characters. I didn't think of where they're going to be. I didn't think of any of the specifics. I just knew that's what needed to happen. And I tried to kind of discovery write my way out of that into the specifics, and that didn't quite work. I think I've tried a couple things. I know what I don't want now. And I was talking to my wife this morning, because she's an actress. She was rehearsing a scene for her class tonight, acting class. And it's this really funny scene where this woman is a real estate agent and comes into this house that she's going to show later that day, and she finds this guy about to hang himself, essentially. And that's really morbid, of course, but it ends up being this really funny scene just because of the way she reacts to it and the way he reacts to her. And all that's, plot-wise, all that happened was a woman goes into a place she's going to sell and finds a guy who's about to hang himself. But they do so much character stuff with it in the specifics of how it's handled. And it's funny. And I was thinking to myself, I can make... That might be a good way to motivate myself to write, is to make it kind of funny and fun. And this mundane task they're doing, maybe they have a friend who's like super quirky and he's like working on some kind of project that he's just super obsessed with, but they need him to do this thing for them tomorrow. Instead of, it could very easily turn into, they go to this place, talk to this person. Can you do this tomorrow? Okay, I'll do this tomorrow. Okay, and see you tomorrow.
Yeah, and it seems like a place in the story where you have room to do that, and it seems like a good place to have it as well, because I know what you're writing. There's a serious scene in the beginning, followed by not an action scene, but sort of a suspenseful section to an extent, and then you go to gather this team and you have a moment to breathe and sort of embrace
this is
a
riff,
lighter side.
Definitely.
So you have some room as well to show your reader that you're going to include this sort of attitude in your book as well. It's in the first few chapters, you kind of want to let the reader know what they're in for. And so that would be a great place to add some of that humor, some of that levity to solidify all the different tones you're going with.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, too, like, we're not so worried at this point about the structure of the novel. Like, we're not doing this for the structure of the novel necessarily. We're doing this to keep the momentum going for my own writing, because we can always change the structure later. We can always shift things around later. That's not something we need to worry too much about right now. This is more just to have things make sense in my own mind and have the story solidified in my own mind so that I can actually get it out.
Right.
You know? And I think that's, in general, a good attitude to have towards these things. I know a lot of people, and this is definitely both of us, I think, I don't want to speak too much for you, but I think we've talked about this before, though.
Yeah.
We've both done a lot of research in the past, like, how should a story be structured? Like, when should this happen? When should that happen? What's the proper way to do all this stuff? And that's all great stuff, but it's all stuff for later on in the process. Really it's good to know going into it so that you can kind of, structure things a bit in your first draft, I'm sure. But where that really comes into play is later on, once you've finished the first draft and you're editing, essentially, like in a movie. You got to get the scenes shot first, then you can go back and edit them together, but you have to actually get the thing shot first. And this is the shooting part right now. We're not super worried about the structure so much. But it can still help you to have a clear idea of where things are going and how things are progressing, and interest yourself in your own story, like we said last week. And
on that, if you find yourself having, and there are authors who say writer's block isn't a thing, because they say it's not an actual thing. It's just you having trouble figuring out what to write next or something like that. And if that's true, there's something to be said for when you find yourself in a place where you're having trouble writing, you're not liking what you write. Change your approach to it, like you're doing right now. Change it from a scene where, it's sort of a straightforward, they go to here and talk to the guy and he agrees to help them. Do what you're doing. Add a different element to it. Add new characters. Add a different feel to the scene. Add some humor. Something to get you interested enough in your scene to actually want to write it. Because I find the worst things I write are the things that I write when I'm not wanting to write that right then. I find when I do change tacks a little bit and find a new way to view the scene that I'm writing, then I can see an angle that I get excited about.
Yeah, and that could be a shift in tone from kind of serious to comedic. That could be introducing a different character. That's what I think I'm going to need to do. I might need to do kind of a mini brainstorm session today and think of create a character, essentially, instead of trying to create him off the cuff. I don't know what
off your cuff.
Off my cuff. Create him off the cuff, as I'm kind of discovering the scene for myself. It might be helpful in this case, and maybe not in all cases, but maybe in this case for me specifically, to take some time to actually think of a character and create him. Because all my characters so far that I've had in the story have been versions of characters that or at least the type of character that I've had in a lot of ideas I've had for a long time.
Yeah.
The two brothers, based on the prodigal son story, which was, my original inspiration for a story like way long time ago. And it's changed since then, but I still have always had these two brothers that have had different names throughout my different iterations of stories, but they're always essentially the same. And their dad as well. And then there's this priestess character who's been, a mage in some stories. And I've had like the set cast of characters that I've had for a long time
that I've wanted from story to story.
Yeah, that I've wanted to do something with, and the specific story they're a part of has changed, but that's kind of my cast. And now I'm having this is the first time I'm running into a character that hasn't really been part of that cast.
Yeah, that's
or that I could run into a character that hasn't been part of that cast, and I need to get out of that box, I think, because the whole point of this was to do something new, and so far it has been fairly new, but with the whole Sicilian Vespers rebellion story kind of foundation, but maybe it's a good opportunity to actually branch out a little bit and create some new things that I haven't really had the chance to do yet.
Yeah, it makes me think of I don't know that this is the case, but it makes me think of this. In Aragon, Christopher Paolini has a scene where Aragon walks into sort of I don't remember why he goes into the Angela's shop. I don't remember why he goes in there. Maybe I think he's just walking around town.
Didn't he see the cat maybe and followed the cat?
Something. But he walks in, and the point of the scene, the goal of the scene, is that Aragorn gets his fortune told, and it sort of foreshadows some stuff that happens later. But that's not all that happens. You end up meeting a character named Angela, who is
that's a great
super
example,
quirky, super fun. I love that character.
Yeah, and Solemn Bum or whatever the cat's name is,
the cat human,
yeah.
the werecat,
yeah.
Who I think is also a great character.
Yeah.
But you meet these two characters who follow you the rest of the story, but they didn't have to even be there. But it's the perfect introduction for them. So you can use mundane plot events. The plot event there is the fortune telling, but that scene does so many other things, including setting up two great characters.
Yeah, that's a great example.
By the way, are butchered in the movie.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh,
well, what wasn't butchered in that movie?
When in the movie, when you go into that shop and you see Angela, you go, "What?
That is
what
not
is what?
What? No."
And it's no disservice to the actress doing Angela in the movie. It's not her fault. It's the directors and whoever decided that was a good idea because, oh my gosh.
Oh man.
I once watched that movie specifically to write in a notebook everything I hated about it.
Really?
Yes,
Dude,
Josie and I both did.
That's hilarious. Wow.
It was a long list.
We should do a dedicated episode sometime to just how bad that is. We could do like a whole series on like bad adaptations. Not that that's super original to do.
You could do anything. You could do so much with it.
You could do a lot
There's
with that.
so many, and they're I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about it.
Anyway, let's get back on topic.
Yeah.
So yes, this week I'm going to push past my I guess I don't want to call it writer's block because I kind of know what I'm going to do to get past it. It's not like this thing out of my control, and I think that kind of implies that it's something that's happening to me, which I don't think is the case. It's more of a stall. I stalled a little bit this week, and I think I know what I'm going to do to overcome that, which is change the tone of this chapter, do something interesting with characters in it, and as this plot event gets fulfilled, make that interesting through making it funny and character focused, and
some of this
creating a new character in the process.
Yeah, and some of this might, and again, we say this a lot, but in the case of the Angela and Solemn Bum example I gave, you don't necessarily know the way you want those characters introduced until later. Maybe you find characters in the story later on and give them an introduction at some point earlier in the story, and that can sort of revitalize scenes you aren't super happy about.
Totally, yeah, and definitely that's part of what we talked about last week was leaving room for more later.
Yes.
So in worst case scenario, this is something I think we mentioned as well sometime before this. If this scene isn't working out, just jump to the next thing and I do know what's going to happen in chapter 5.
Right.
So just skip to that for now and go back and fill in that gap later. And maybe it doesn't need to be filled in. Maybe that's a scene that doesn't even need to exist if it's not working out. It's probably self-explanatory to some extent that, they go and talk to these people. They get them to do the thing. Now they have a crew for tomorrow. Here we go. Because I didn't even have names for those characters yet. Like they weren't even part of the story in my plotting.
Yeah.
So
and I think
maybe it's unnecessary.
That's especially pertinent, I think, if you went into this next week and for like the first 2 days you just still couldn't get through that scene, then don't continue to waste your time on it. Just jump to the next thing that you can write, and that you keep with the mantra, just keep writing something, keep going in your story. Come back to there. Once you have something you can add to it that revitalizes it, like once you have an Angela character, you can come back and throw into that scene.
Totally, yeah.
And make it interesting.
Maybe you discover something later on in the process that you want to kind of retroactively introduce earlier on, and maybe that fits perfectly with what this scene needs to be,
And we do that all the time, even just on accident. I was not even thinking about this in my story until like last night. But in the future, on like much further on in the story, you meet a new character, or the plan was to meet him much further on in the story.
That's part of your original plot was he was going to be involved later on.
He was much later. He was sort of a prisoner of the Empire, and he sort of plays a function in a plot point later. But just not even intending to think about it, it just popped in my head. I could introduce him as a fun character much earlier on. He can play a much more pivotal role in the story, and that element perfectly fits in with a section of my plot that I knew was going to be sparse as far as the entertaining aspect of it, and he would totally fix that. So, like, you come up with new aspects to your story all the time. Even we have a 27-point or beat structure, whatever. You come up with new elements and new plot pieces and new characters all the time.
Yeah, and
some won't even make it into the final book.
But yeah, it's good to be open to that, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think everyone kind of runs into those times where they discover something new and kind of want to change what they've done before. And it's good to incorporate that, you know, embrace those ideas as they come and see if that can fit into places where, because everybody has those sections of their plot too. If you're a plotter, that you know kind of what needs to happen, but you don't have a whole lot of specifics, and you're like, oh, you know, I'm going to get to that when I write it, you know. And that can be hard when you get to those sections, and that seems like a good way to go about it, is to be open to discovering things later on. But again, all of this is to be taken with a grain of salt, because we're just trying this for the first time ourselves. We're imagining this is going to work pretty well, and it's making sense to us right now.
Leave.
So
Don't leave.
Wait, no. So we will check back in with you next week to see how that went for us. This is all a discovery process for sure. Informed, of course, by research we're doing and that kind of stuff, but we don't have the experience yet to really know this is our process. You know, we're making up the process as we're going, based on how things are going, which is kind of fun. So yeah, do we want to move on to? Oh, not how to. What did I just say? How to? I don't think I did. Anyway,
what?
Are we satisfied with this section, John? Anything else
I'm
to
good
add?
to go.
Cool. Well, we are thinking about adding a new section, not only to the podcast, but potentially to a blog we want to start writing for our website, which is www.worldbuildersanonymous.com, based on doing the world building for you, so you don't have to take time to do it yourself, or at least showing you all the things you need to know about certain topics for the purposes of your first draft. Because when you're doing your first draft, you don't need to know the O2 concentration in a diving bell in closed spaces at different pressures and how it's going to affect the diver and when they're going to get a headache after they've breathed too much of the CO2 in, that kind of stuff. You don't need to know that specific amount of detail, but it'd be nice to know generally how long you can stay under in a dive bell, what basic effect it's going to have on a diver's body, how they might carry one on a ship, what type of ship they might need.
Even more basically, like what a diving bell looks like.
Yeah, or different kinds that have existed at certain time periods, that kind of stuff. So just enough to know how to incorporate it into your story. And the same with anything. It could be cannons, it could be forging a sword, it could be types of clothes that existed at certain time periods, the materials they might be made out of, anything like that. And so today we wanted to kind of give a little bit of a pilot effort in that, and give you guys a little bit of a teaser on what that might look like, and discover it for ourselves a little bit too, by talking about a couple of subjects that we both already know a lot about from our from our youths spent in libraries.
I don't know about that. It's a lifelong passion, I would say.
Oh, I see, yes. Well, I'm just saying for me, this was something that I spent hours and hours in the library.
Well, don't let me in here.
Okay, whatever.
It's about you.
But those subjects are sharks and penguins.
Sharks and penguins.
I think we might need another gong hit, but it might be too much effort to pick it up and do it again.
I got this.
Yeah. Sharks and penguins. I've been interested in sharks for a long time, since I was a little kid. And like I said, I would just research all the time at the library. I read every book they had on it. And
I remember that. They were all around the house.
When did you start getting interested in penguins? Because I don't think that's been always for you.
I don't know. I don't know what happened.
It was just like one day you were obsessed with penguins.
I've always liked penguins. I mean, who doesn't like a good penguin? I mean, how could you not? They're adorable, fluffy little flightless birds. Do you feel bad for them? They have like a sympathy factor because they can't fly.
The birds that can't fly.
But like, I don't know. Just at some point, I just started really liking me some penguins. I think it was like, I must have been like freshman year at college or something. You know, most people go to college, they get into maybe alcohol or drugs. I got into penguins. That was me.
Oh boy. Okay. Well,
just your normal college experience.
Just your super normal, very, very normal. That's what we're all about here at World Builders Anonymous, being super normal.
Super normal.
Oh boy. So hopefully this will be kind of fun. I don't know how many of you are planning on incorporating sharks or penguins into your stories, but this is kind of a proof of concept for us and for you.
Probably
just have some fun with
it. More sharks than penguins, let's be honest.
Yeah?
I've read all of one book that has a penguin in it.
What?
Like a serious
You don't know
novel.
anything about penguins?
No. No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Oh,
I'm
stories
saying
with penguins in them.
Yeah, Maximum Ride 4, I think. They went to Antarctica for whatever reason, and there was an emperor penguin there. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But sharks are in a lot of things.
They are in a lot of things.
You
That
can
is
do
true.
a lot with sharks.
All right, John. Well, let's start with penguins since it might be the shorter
Oh, boy.
subject. John, what is your favorite kind of penguin?
My favorite kind of penguin is a blue fairy penguin.
Ooh, I like blue fairy penguins.
Blue
Those are
fairy
the ones in
penguins?
Africa, right?
Well, maybe they live in Africa. I don't recall exactly. I think they might live in Australia actually, but they're probably not Australia. They are the smallest of penguins, and they are blue. They're so cute. They're tiny. I don't remember how tiny, but they're very tiny. They're so adorable. But yeah. So, I mean, what would you want to know about a penguin?
Well, if you're going to write a story with a penguin in it, you might need to know what kind of penguins live in different places. And apparently, we don't know that at all.
Well, one thing. Well, I know. I don't give me some credit. One thing that a lot of people don't realize. They see penguins and go, "Oh, those are cold weather animals," but they live in a lot of warm climates. There are definitely a lot of warm weather penguins. They're African penguins, and
Well, penguins get stereotyped into being from the Antarctic. It's really a bummer.
I'm starting a campaign for the better treatment of penguins.
Yes.
But whatever. Anyway,
What type of penguin would you find in the Antarctic or Arctic?
You find a few kinds. You would find the macaroni penguin. That's the one with
macaroni penguin.
The macaroni penguin.
What? Why is
It's
it
the
called
one-
a macaroni penguin?
It's got little yellow tufts that come out of its eyebrows,
Oh,
and they call it a
Okay.
macaroni penguin.
Like from
you'd
Happy
find
Feet.
those. You'd find emperor penguins, of course, the big old 4-foot tall penguins.
and those are Antarctic, correct?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
They
And
live
you-
in the cold place.
Another question I have about penguins is: do they all nest their eggs on their feet, or is that just emperor penguins?
That's an emperor penguin thing, and they do
Okay.
that specifically because of the cold weather, and they have to stand still for like 6 months, and they need to keep the egg warm. Actually, one thing that'd be fun to write about if you're including a penguin is if you're in a little bit of a warmer climate, there are penguins who make little rock nests, and it's really cool. They pick up rocks and then with their beaks and then walk over and put it down. And they go get another rock, and they end up with these little nests that they lay their eggs in.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's also a good for animals specifically. I think one of the things that might be valuable about knowing about different animals is to incorporate different aspects of them. If you're creating a new world, not ours,
Yeah.
and maybe incorporate aspects of penguins or anything else, and create your own sort of species or variant or kind
Yeah,
of a
you're
half
right,
bird,
right.
half reptile thing that kind of acts like a penguin, and just give it a little more realism, like how
Yeah.
I'm basing my plot, or at least not the plot, but the major events of my story are based on a historical event from the history of Sicily. And so it's kind of a similar kind of thing. If you're creating a new
Right,
animal,
right.
base it on something real, so that gives it an added level of depth and realism.
Yeah.
Maybe even if you're going to change some things about it.
Right, and I'm glad you said that because we don't mean to imply that anyone's going to actually write in depth about penguins in their books. That's not the goal of this. This is kind of a fun exercise for us to sort of test out the idea, as well as demonstrate sort of the kind of thinking process one might go through to research / brainstorm about an element that you want to put in your book.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to sharks then.
Sure, let's go for it.
What do you know about sharks, John? You were telling me before the podcast started that we have some overlap with sharks, but I was not
Yes.
aware of this, so I might have to quiz some of your shark knowledge here.
Well, there's a certain amount of what would you call it? Splash of the shark splash from you onto me. Like there were shark books all over the house when we were kids, and in our shared bedroom as kids, there was a big old shark poster on the wall with all the different sharks on it. So I know about the little cookie cutter shark with its little circle mouth that likes to bite things like submarines.
Yep.
And I know about the lemon shark and the little dog shark, and I know about the great white shark and a bunch of sharks. I know a lot about sharks.
Okay, cool. That's fair enough. Cool. Yeah, I think sharks are just fascinating animals in general. They have a lot of abilities that make them interesting too. That could be definitely adapted into different, or incorporated into sort of a fantasy animal that you're creating. Not even like a fish, like anything. Specifically, their electroreception sense. That they have,
that's really interesting.
which is fascinating. They have these jelly-filled pores on their snouts that have a single little tiny hair inside of them, and these pores and the jelly that's inside of them, they're called the ampullae of Lorenzini. They can actually detect the electromagnetic pulses that come out of something's brain and into its muscles that make it move.
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's insane.
From a pretty limited distance away, but if you're looking for something underneath the sand on the bottom of the ocean and you're kind of cruising back and forth, that's a pretty useful thing to be able to do, and their brains can interpret that somehow to kind of see it in a sense. It's not the same as vision, of course, but that's a fascinating superpower that sharks have that I think could definitely be something that you incorporate into something else.
Yeah. One thing that's cool, The Lies of Locke Lamora is a really, really good book, one of my favorites. And in it, there's a shark that's specific to the world that Scott Lynch wrote. There's a wolf shark.
There's such a thing as a wolf shark.
Really?
It's probably different, but yeah.
I'm certain it's not what this is.
Okay.
I thought it was a tiger shark. I didn't know it was a wolf shark.
There's all kinds of animal sharks.
Oh, whatever. But anyway, one thing it likes it. It's this. Actually, it plays an interesting role in the story. It's not central or anything, but there's sort of gladiatorial games, but it's sort of a Venice-like environment where there's water everywhere. And so their sort of gladiator games revolve around, instead of like a lion, it's a shark. And they're jumping from these little rafts, and the sharks jump out of the water to try to get them. And, it's worth noting that there are sharks that do that. They jump out of the water. Usually, they're actually doing it, if I understand it correctly, to catch a thing that's already on the surface of the water. They grab it as they're going up.
Yeah, there's very little that sharks would have to jump out of the water to get. But it's just their momentum if they're coming up from the bottom towards like a seal at the surface. Like this is what you see great whites do all the time. It just carries them out of the water. They're not trying to break the surface necessarily. Yeah,
but and it's cursory things like it's written that they have really rough skin and they have, their anatomy is a certain way. They can smell blood from a long way away. That kind of stuff. These details that are not super in depth or anything. Nothing like the understanding of how their electric sense works, but details that make you feel like it's a real thing in the world that really helps sell it.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, you can definitely take elements of that and create your own thing that's not necessarily a shark, but it could be even like a land-based predator that has some sort of similar senses or
right. That'd be cool.
That'd be like that.
I haven't seen that done.
Land shark.
Land shark. But like having some kind of, I could see it as being like a lizard kind of deal that has that electric, ability to sense where things are nearby. And if the character doesn't know it, they try to hide behind something or hide out of sight. And then the thing can find it anyway because it can sense them. Like something like that. You can take an element from a shark that maybe builds a little rock nest like a penguin and lays its eggs in it. You can incorporate everything.
A shark win.
A shark win.
A pengark. Pengark.
But like, and that's silly. Obviously, it's silly to combine a penguin and a shark. But man, if you did, I'd read that book.
That's all I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, but I am saying I would buy that book.
But I think sharks are probably a thing people would probably incorporate more often in the stories than penguins probably.
Oh yeah, but
it'd be good to know certain basic things about them.
Right, but the cool thing, and it's worth looking into this as well because sharks are one of those animals that if you put it in your story in the right way, it's instant fear. Like if the water's dark and a shark is there, you don't even have to describe the shark in much detail. There's a fear associated with, knowing there's this thing that has such a scary vibe to it in the near vicinity of your character, especially if that character has been shown that harm can come to them. That's suspense. And you can really use things like that.
Yeah, and even things like the cookie cutter shark or the lantern shark, like the fact that there are sharks that have these sacs of bacteria that glow in the dark. You know, the bioluminescence is very cool. And the cookie cutter shark, it's very interesting to me that they actually have been known to take little chunks out of the rubber that covers nuclear submarines. You know, so you'd have some sort of animal that is kind of like that, with the little swarms of these things that can, you know, basically tear apart a submarine or something like that. Basically, like, take it to the next level and, like, you know, make it this kind of menacing thing rather than this little cute thing that just kind of go boink, you know.
Right.
That's it.
Oh man, when you said menacing instead of a cute thing, I had just a swarm of killer penguins. The possibilities are endless.
Like swarm of bloodthirsty killer penguins.
If that's not a Sharknado kind of B movie,
Oh, that's the next thing. That's the next thing.
Then I don't know what we're coming to if we haven't made that yet.
That's crazy.
But yeah, I like what you said there. Taking elements that are real and taking them to the next level. If you're making your own animal, and this is the complaint I had when we were talking about dragons a couple of weeks ago. You know, don't just do dragons. Do something. Do something with dragons that's extra if you want to do dragons, or make something yourself. If you're writing a fantasy story, you have the sort of the ability to take things that we recognize and do something amazing with them. So you can make a shark, but maybe, you know, take that electric sense thing and, you know, turn it up and make it so they can find you no matter where you are, or, you know, make them huge and make them scary, make them something unique, but use the things that are concrete and real about them to ground your new creation in a sense of reality. Because that's what really makes things scary and interesting to me, is when they're obviously grounded in something that's real, but taken up to a level that's like that's so big that it becomes even scarier.
Yeah, totally. And I also think that the value of this too is kind of the inspiring of ideas as well. Like you might hear, you know, that thing about cookie cutter sharks and be like, oh, that's kind of a cool inspiration for this idea. And like you go off on a tangent there, and it's good not to get, you know, caught up on that tangent. But yeah, and I think other topics will probably lend themselves more to kind of everything you need to know for a first draft type thing, because no one's really going to do penguins or sharks.
Penguins and sharks, it can be a thing.
It could be a thing. But that's kind of a template for this kind of thing. And it'll hopefully, like I said, be accompanied by blog posts and that kind of stuff. And maybe eventually combine those blog posts into a book. You know, everything you need to know about X to write your first draft. I think there's a better title for that, but
working title.
Yes. So keep a eye on the website for that coming out, and our social media and stuff like that. I think that's probably a good place to wrap things up, John?
Sure. That sounds good to me.
Cool. Do you want to plug anything today?
We have, there's one thing I really want to talk about real quick. And it's brief. There wasn't a Reddit question this week because I got derailed looking at other things on Reddit. I was also on vacation. But one thing it's a lot of fun to do if you have a little bit of spare time, and it's really useful as well, and I think it makes you a better writer.
Oh, right.
Is on the Fantasy Writers subreddit. Really probably on any writing Reddit subreddit page as well. People will often post their first chapter or a sample of their writing on there for critique, for people to read it and let them know what you think. And I've done that to a few things on there, and I can't tell you how useful it is for your own writing process. You see the things, because looking at something, I think we all generally read the best writing that's out there. Like, the books that we read are very well written, very polished. You know,
at least the ones that get popular enough for you to hear about and then read.
Exactly.
Except
but there's
for
something to be said. There's something to be said for reading, and I don't mean to insult anyone who is putting their stuff on there, but beginner or subpar writing, and finding the things in there that make you feel like it's not quite there yet. Seeing, there's a lot of info dumping here. I feel like I can't connect with these characters. I feel like I don't understand what's going on because there are too many obscure terms I don't understand in the first chapter. Looking at those things and understanding what
makes something not work.
What makes something not work is really helpful, and I think more helpful to me anyway than watching a video about things that don't work.
Yeah.
Like experiencing it for myself and reading and going, oh, I don't like that. makes more sense to me
And
than
then
someone
asking-
saying, avoid this.
Yeah, and then asking, why don't I like that?
Exactly.
What's not working here? And
Then you
Sorry, go ahead.
Then you can look back at your own writing and see, oh, I'm doing that.
Yeah, totally.
And then you can kind of have some new perspective to fix it.
Maybe give you a little bit of objectivity about your own writing, maybe. It's definitely important, though, too, to realize that can become a time sink as well.
Oh, sure.
I did that a lot a while ago when I first came out to LA. I got involved with a website called Scribophile. And it's basically the idea is you post your stories using points that you earn by reviewing other people's stories. So you can write long reviews, you can write short reviews. I think you get points based on I can't remember exactly how it works, but you earn points by reviewing other people's work and then use those points to post your work for other people to review and give tips on and just give your opinion essentially. And of course, it turns into a huge crapshoot sometimes because people love to express their opinion about all kinds of things, even if they're not always right. But it is a lot of fun. But it definitely ended up being a distraction for me.
Yeah,
and
I can see that.
And another one of those excuses to not push through a hard section in your own writing and kind of retreat to something more comfortable. So just be careful with that. But it is definitely really interesting to see exactly what you were saying, like realizing something doesn't work and then asking yourself why it's not working and picking that apart a little bit so that you can avoid those same mistakes. Definitely a valuable thing to do in moderation.
Yeah, in moderation, it can definitely be a helpful tool to help you learn to be a better writer.
And
Okay.
where did you say you found that, John?
That is on the Fantasy Writers subreddit.
Okay, cool.
If you want to look there or on the fantasy subreddit for this week's Reddit question, if you happen to be listening to this during the week of its first release.
Cool. Awesome. Nice. Do we want to mention anything about our thing we're doing in November, or is it too premature for that?
We have been talking to, well, I guess we can kind of plug them already and kind of you do them a bit of a favor there. Not that they need it. We have been talking to a podcast called Beyond the Trope. They're some cool people who talk about lots of nerdy stuff, and that's the kind of thing we're into. So we talked with them. We are hopefully going to be appearing on their show here coming up in a couple months. Actually, it's next month, I guess. Probably sometime in November. Look for that. Beyond the Trope. You can find them anywhere you find podcasts. And there's some cool people, and we're going to be hanging out with them before too long. So that's pretty neat, I think.
Looking forward to that. Cool. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. You could also give us an email. What's our email address again, John? I always forget.
WBApodcast@gmail.com.
That's right. Cool. Check out our Facebook page, our website, all that good stuff. And anything else to add?
Happy writing, everybody.
Is that
That's all I got.
That's your sign off for this week?
Happy writing, everybody.
I thought I was the bad sign off person. You're taking my job.
Well,
Johnny.
I had the bad intro this time, so I thought I'd also take the bad outro.
That is a good point. Cool.
Happy writing, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful week.
Can you just do the whole podcast in that voice, please?
I can't. It hurts.
It hurts too much. All right, people. Put shark penguins into your stories, and we'll let you know how that goes for us next week. We're not doing that. All right, bye.
Shark penguins!
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.